Good afternoon, everyone. I am John Mann, Director of Education for Lakeside. The theme of this week, of course, is artificial intelligence, and we're fortunate to have Nelson Rosario with us again this afternoon. Nelson is a tech lawyer and founder of Rosario Tech Law, LLC, a boutique law firm focused on working with clients, dealing with emerging technologies that are changing the way we think about privacy, property, and power. Nelson is also an adjunct law professor. He has been quoted in the New York Times, TechCrunch, Law 360, and other publications. In addition to being a regular speaker on legal issues raised by the emerging technology topics, Nelson is an appointee to the Illinois Supreme Court AI Task Force to create recommendations for the use of generative AI in Illinois courts. Nelson has degrees in computer science, history, and political science. He's licensed to practice law in the state of Illinois and before the United States Patent and Trademark Office. And today's session is AI, the promise and peril of updating the law. I do ask you would please mute your cell phone ringers and help me in welcoming Nelson Rosario.
Afternoon, everyone. As John mentioned, I spoke earlier today, just kind of talking about legal developments in AI. I recognize a couple of you who are here. The jokes may end up being the same, and there is a bit of material that I've repurposed for this talk, so it's not wholly original, but if you're here for a second time, you're probably as big of a nerd about this as I am. So glad to see you all. It truly is a pleasure and an honor to be speaking here at Lakeside. My mother-in-law's family has been coming here since the 1940s, actually, and my wife and I have been establishing a tradition of our children coming up here. They love it, but as I was telling John earlier, I've probably given, I don't know, north of 100 public talks over the last 8 years, 9 years or so, and the Q&A session from the Lakesiders this morning may have been the most intense Q&A that I have ever had. And I've spoken in foreign countries to foreign lawyers, and everyone here was very keyed in. So I'm excited to talk to you about kind of the promise and peril of automating the law. Like I said, some of the material is reused from earlier. I am the founder of Rosario Tech Law. I work mostly with technology startups in kind of the fintech blockchain space, as well as artificial intelligence companies. They're mostly venture capital back. I do have a degree in history and political science from the University of Minnesota, a degree in computer science from Florida State University, and I went to law school in Chicago at Chicago-Kent, where incidentally I have taught a law school class called Blockchain and Cryptocurrency in the Law for the past 6 years. We were one of the first law schools in the entire country, I think we were 6th or 5th, to offer a class on that, which has been a fascinating experience. I'm involved in a variety of organizations here that you may see. I love Lakeside. I've been coming here since 2006. And national parks, love Chicago. Please visit if you don't regularly anyway. But I'm happy to talk to you today about AI. So, what is artificial intelligence? Oftentimes people think of the Terminator, right? AI is a scary thing. As I said this morning, one of my goals is to try and demystify the technology. I was speaking to my wife after the talk, and she said, it's just so technical, and I think you did a good job, but I'm just not that interested in it. And that's fine. She didn't want to hurt my feelings. I get a lot of, that's nice, honey. But we support each other in different ways. We don't have to be interested in the same things. But, none of this is magic. It may be sci-fi. It may be ever-evolving. But AI is something that's understandable, and the way that it's impacting the way that lawyers do their job and the way we kind of interact with lawyers as a society is not anything that's beyond comprehension, right? So these are kind of the three different buckets of AI, right? There's narrow AI, sometimes called weak AI. I don't know why weak. There's nothing weak about it, right? You can kind of think of it, a narrow AI as like a subject matter expert. Okay, it's been trained on data relevant to a definable problem set. Okay, so perhaps it's medical imaging in the lungs, right? I used to do a lot of innovation work for Siemens, Siemens, the medical device company. When I first graduated from law school, there's also general AI or strong AI. This is a hypothetical AI that possesses the ability to understand, learn, and apply knowledge across a wide range of tasks. This would be AI that seems like it's a human being, right? And then super intelligent AI, which is purely theoretical, but something that exceeds human intelligence. Just out of curiosity, how many kind of science fiction fans are there in the audience? There you go. It's okay, you can admit it. Myself, right, super AI is kind of something that comes up in sci-fi a lot, except now we're starting to see the kind of groundwork for a lot of those sci-fi concepts. As I told somebody after the talk this morning, the 13-year-old version of me who's playing video games and reading sci-fi can't believe that he is now actually working with companies that are trying to build out a lot of these concepts. So, but all of these different types of AI, they depend upon really understandable old techniques that are computer science kind of areas of research that have been around for decades, right? Things like machine learning, the learning is, the system is learning from data. We talked about, big data sets. It's identifying patterns, and it's making decisions with minimal human intervention. Usually it's supervised with some sort of human involvement in the learning process, whether it's categorizing the information, what's good information, what's bad information. You can think of this kind of like, people look at an image, when you have to do those CAPTCHAs when you log into a website to prove you're human. Spot the stoplights, and you have to click every single square on there. You're training somebody else's AI when you do that, I guarantee it. That data set is being sent off to somebody else. That's how that CAPTCHA company is making money. Maybe it's going to Google, maybe it's going to Microsoft, whatever. Sometimes I fail at those tests because I don't know, is this a car in the image, or is the bumper of the car? I don't know. But those are the problems that kind of machine learning algorithms deal with. Natural language processing is something that has been a big focus in the legal field specifically for a long time, right? When you think of automated electronic research, it relies a lot upon NLP stuff. Computer vision is more so, how do self-driving cars navigate their environment? Computer vision is really tough because you get a lot of edge cases, and it needs to know, is this a stop sign, or is it a very thin person who's standing and holding an umbrella? It has to be able to differentiate between that. But I think it's important to understand that these sorts of AI applications exist in a lot of industries that we just don't necessarily know that we're interacting with them. Again, AI is about mimicking human intelligence. It's not a new phenomenon. Furthermore, the use of AI in law is not a new phenomenon. It's something that's been around for a while. So we'll talk about this. So for those of you that were here this morning, you may have seen this image. Anybody recognize this image who's not here this morning? This is something called Mechanical Turk. It was in the 18th century in Europe, and it pretended to be a machine, that they would wheel out, and it would play a game of chess against a human player. Eventually, it was discovered that, lo and behold, there was a human being in the box there, pretending to be, a automatic machine that plays chess. This is Alan Turing, the British computer scientist, really the father of theoretical computer science, but the father of AI. He's the one who came up with the idea of a Turing test, which a Turing test, it's like a hypothetical for judging whether or not a machine is quote unquote intelligent. So the way that Turing originally conceptualized this kind of thought experiment was a human being sitting down at a desk. Perhaps there's a screen, there's a computer terminal. It's able to enter in questions using a keyboard, and then answers come on the screen. And if the human being entering those questions didn't know what was on the other side, didn't know if it was a computer, didn't know if it was another person, and wasn't sure, you could say that that machine had passed the Turing test. Turing, of course, was involved in a lot of other things. If you've seen the movie The Imitation Game, starring Benedict Cumberbatch, he was instrumental in cracking the Nazi codes during World War II. Did all sorts of other stuff as well, right? Kind of going back to the history of AI and just hammering home this point that it really is not new. It's something that people had been kind of philosophizing about for a long time, but really kind of started to crystallize into a field of study in the 1950s. There was a conference at Dartmouth. This cites, I actually asked ChatGPT, tell me about the history of artificial intelligence, and this was the answer it gave me. It said this Dartmouth conference was organized by John McCarthy, who was another early researcher in the space, but also Norbert Wiener, who somebody in the morning session brought up, which is a fairly obscure reference unless you're kind of like a nerd into this space. I'm happy that he's not here so I don't get hammered with another really difficult question. No, I'm not. It'd be fine if he's here. But there was kind of a boom in interest in artificial intelligence in the 70s and 80s. Really, people were thinking about it as expert systems. I actually took a course as part of my computer science degree called Expert Systems. And it was all about kind of, if you think about a problem area that you want to develop solutions for, you have to define the problem, right? And when you have a well-defined problem area, you're more likely to have well-defined solutions to attack that problem, to work it, to figure out and come up with those solutions. But then there was kind of things stalled out for a variety of reasons. So AI might not be new, but recent versions of AI are different from past iterations. We talked to, there's basically three principal reasons for this. There's more computational power than we've ever had in human history, more access to data sets, like that old kind of saw, if you don't know what the product is or the product is free, you're the product, right? We're all giving out data to these big tech companies, these AI companies to train their models to do new things. And then there's been a bunch of innovation in the way that AI interprets that data, right? Kind of taking a step up in the narrative of why is there all this interest in AI? Well, the Biden administration had an executive order that was issued last October, and it was on the safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of artificial intelligence. This came about because there's a very serious geopolitical considerations related to the development of AI, right? Makes sense if you think about mimicking human intelligence. We already have fraud problems on the internet, obviously. And if now you're able to do that in an automated fashion with bots that you deploy on the internet and are not human beings that you could necessarily accountable, that's a problem, right? So they put out this executive order. The federal government is really trying to get ahead of this, all right? But it's not just the government, it's also industry. Last year, there was 1,000 tech leaders and researchers that are focused on artificial intelligence. Elon Musk was one of them, signed a letter basically asking for a moratorium on development in the space. Their principal concern was that, well, what if we develop that super intelligent AI and it becomes runaway and it decides that human beings are no longer needed, right? That's kind of the doomsday, the Terminator scenario. How do we prevent that? But really, this is driven by wanting to avoid the mistakes made with social media. This desire is understandable, but they're very different technologies, right? One is centrally administered. You know where Facebook is, right? You know where Mark Zuckerberg is. They have an address. AI, you can download foundational models and build your own AI tools on your laptop, at your cottage here. It's a very different thing. It doesn't have to be centrally administered, right? But it can be an extreme knowledge kind of multiplier. And it's also lowered the barriers for innovation. One of the areas, I think, legal practice is actually going to be one of the big beneficiaries of the development of new AI tools, but also drug discovery is already seeing a lot of innovation that wouldn't have occurred otherwise because of the use of AI tools. And I'll get into that a little bit more later with some specific examples. So people are already using AI in disputes in business. This is not new, online dispute resolution, right? One of the biggest and most successful ODR, online dispute resolution companies, is one that Amazon uses that basically developed, over a decade ago, an automated process by which people could dispute, buying and selling of goods online, legal analytics and prediction, document analysis, and e-discovery. E-discovery has been around forever. This is an old report from Deloitte, artificial intelligence and machine learning and e-discovery and beyond. When you think about, it's funny, so I use the Microsoft Office suite, as basically every lawyer kind of has to, right, for interacting and producing documents for clients. And all of the information, all of my interactions with clients are almost exclusively electronic. All of that information is discoverable in disputes. I don't mind the fact that Microsoft has that. Are they training on confidential data? Well, they claim they're not. Do I believe that? No. They probably have very cleverly, worded their terms of service and everything else so that they can discover things. But kind of to the earlier point of knowing where Facebook is, you know where Microsoft is, you know who you can lodge a complaint with. So AI has been used in e-discovery for a long time. I had a friend who was a lawyer in DC and couldn't really get a good job right after he graduated law school over a decade ago, and he did document review, e-discovery kind of stuff. And a lot of those jobs have all now disappeared, right? Because it's just been automated and it's so much more efficient. Contract analysis and management, you can, if you know what terms you're looking for, going back to the idea of a well-defined problem, then you can scan contracts, right? And you can see, hey, how long, what is the end date? Are there any particular language in there that you're kind of expecting in advance that will tell you what the term of the contract is? What is the reason for breach? Can you have efficient breach? Are there reasons that people can get out of the contract? Sentiment and emotion analysis. This is really, you use this in disputes, but you also use it in business. And in fact, I'm pretty sure some of the best researchers in this space over the last decade or so have been scooped up by hedge funds and other kind of Wall Street institutions, in part to analyze data on social media, to try and identify trends that their competitors are not necessarily identifying, which can enhance decision-making, fraud detection, customer service, regulatory compliance, and on and on and on. But as with all of this stuff, you don't want to over-rely on the tool. You don't want to replace your own judgment, especially as practicing lawyers, with that of an AI output. As everybody may have heard, last year there was a big kerfuffle because a licensed New York lawyer, I think it was actually two, they were sanctioned for using fake ChatGPT cases in a legal brief. So what happened there is apparently the lawyer was in a rush, was trying to file something in a pending lawsuit, and asked ChatGPT to generate a brief that was responsive to the deadline that they had to meet, and it did. The problem was it made citations to legal cases that didn't exist. Well, what does that even mean? Well, AIs hallucinate, okay? Because of the nature of their architecture, they're really, in a certain sense, kind of guess machines. And so they're trying to make an educated guess based on the data that they've been trained on. And so the lawyer prompted the AI machine, the ChatGPT, with, hey, I need a brief that does X, Y, and Z. And the AI said, oh, sure, here is a brief that's responsive to that query. And by the way, here are cases that are, support your position. The lawyer thought, oh, great, ChatGPT, this is a serious product. It's obviously correct, and they filed it. And the judge, or more likely the judge's law clerk, checked the citations and realized that these are not real cases. Now, I worked for a federal judge, a magistrate judge, my last year of law school, and judges are gods. They won't say that, but they are. I don't know if there's any retired judges in the audience. I should be careful. But I do not want to imagine how that lawyer felt in that hearing with the judge who was saying, what were you doing, right? But what is an AI hallucination? It's a phenomenon where a large language model, which is what ChatGPT is, which is really kind of why this has exploded in interest in the public consciousness, right? It's a large language model that generates text. That's that generative AI part. Okay, if you've heard of generative AI, that means it's just generating content based on training data. So it's when a generative AI chatbot or computer vision tool perceives patterns or objects that are non-existent or imperceptible to human observers, creating outputs that are nonsensical or altogether inaccurate. This is from IBM, by the way. So hallucinations, that's what happened. It hallucinated cases, the lawyer filed the brief, lawyer got in trouble. I don't know if the lawyer lost his license. I don't think so, which is probably lucky in that regard. But people are going to be using AI in business. They already are. 40% of business owners, based on this survey that Forbes did, are concerned about an overdependence on technology due to AI use. Business owners think that AI may improve their customer relationships. I don't know if anybody feels like their customer relationships with their frequent businesses, or I see someone shaking their head no, has been improved, but that's what people think. There's lots of interest, lots of money going into this. But again, we have this, when it's that easy to generate information, you have a problem of misinformation. Misinformation was already a problem before kind of widespread commercial consumer-grade use of artificial intelligence. There's been corporate use of artificial intelligence in the past for a long time, but that's because large corporations had the resources to really leverage the technology, and it's only recently, as kind of embodied in ChatGPT and OpenAI, that the amount of resources necessary to deploy AI tools has reached a level where, like, you can use ChatGPT on your phone, right? There's another AI tool that's like a search engine called Perplexity. I'd highly recommend you play around with it. And it will give you sources and whatnot from where it's getting answers, but you use it just like you would a search engine. So how is this changing the practice of law? Well, about half of my book of business is intellectual property law. I have a degree in computer science. I work with emerging tech founders. I'm a registered patent attorney, so I'm constantly thinking about IP matters. So how is this impacting my practice, just as an example? Well, the Patent Office put out this guidance and example for AI-assisted inventions back in February. The patent system was developed to incentivize and protect human ingenuity and the investments needed to translate that ingenuity. Whenever I'm feeling particularly snarky, I like to argue that I'm a constitutional lawyer, in part because patents and intellectual property are actually in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8. I'm not really a constitutional lawyer, but I find it funny. But the system was developed to protect human ingenuity. Well, if we know that these tools are out there and they're able to amplify the ability of human engineers, inventors, et cetera, to be better at their job, where does that line start shifting between human ingenuity and machine ingenuity? Maybe it's not ingenuity, but kind of mentioned earlier, drug discovery, things like that. So there's this fear or this concern about balancing between promoting that human ingenuity while not unnecessarily locking up innovation related to AI-assisted inventions. So there's lots of, from that guidance, there's lots of concerns related to subject matter eligibility, specifically with respect to inventions. How do these questions change based on the underlying subject matter, okay? So if you are using an AI tool and it develops perhaps a chemical compound that works in a way that has unexpected new results, but no human being had ever come up with it before, should that be, patent eligible? Should you be able to claim that as an invention? At what point do these things start coming obvious? How are they can be enabled? The USPTO didn't meet this May 13th guideline, but actually just this week, they issued kind of follow-up guidance and examples of what this would look like. This was all predicated on that executive order that I mentioned earlier that came out October of last year. But again, this is all about, how do we ensure human ingenuity and inventiveness is appropriately rewarded? Inventorship requires natural persons, right? What happens when we have synthetic persons? Are we going to get to a point where we have synthetic persons? Or, kind of AI avatars that are, human-like? It's kind of funny that, Microsoft Clippy is now kind of is apparently going to make a resurgence and be AI-enabled and actually be useful this time around. But what if Clippy comes up with ideas that you didn't think of, right? And fundamentally, the patent office was like, the inventor, the human being, has to contribute in some sort of significant manner, right? They have to make a contribution to the claimed invention. They can't just run a program, right? And the program output is this new invention, and they didn't have to do anything. We don't want to necessarily stop that, but the way that our laws are set up, we don't want to give that sort of kind of monopoly-like rights to inventions that are a result of that. There's no bright line test for determining whether or not a contribution is significant. There's some principles, it's that's a little too dry, but and then other kind of like questions with respect to, well, what if you want to name the AI system as an inventor? There's actually a very prolific inventor. I think he's based in the United States, but he has been filing for patent applications around the world in different jurisdictions, and including an AI system that he built as a co-inventor on the application. So far in the United States, he's been rejected. I think in South Africa, they actually granted a patent to him and the AI system as co-inventors. But there's lots of kind of, outstanding questions and minutia. But that's really where, for someone like myself, the game is going to be focused on those lines. What is significant contributions for humans? And I think it really kind of extends beyond that, right? It's not just that particular part of my practice. I think that's going to be, what are human contributions in a world where we're all kind of using these AI tools? The Copyright Office actually was, I think, the first part of the federal government that put out guidance. And basically, March 16, 2023, saying, copyright is there to protect creative endeavors. And I don't know if you've ever played around with any of the image generation AI tools that are out there, things like Midjourney, Sora. None of that can be protected via copyright. Now, you can change it, right, and modify it and everything else, and maybe that, subsequent change can get copyright protection. They have a whole website directed to copyright and artificial intelligence. And then there's been a lot of interest in the government and kind of lawyers. State bar associations have been very forward-thinking in this regard. Courts have been commissioning task force. This is a list at the American Bar Association's website. California, Florida, Illinois, Kentucky, Minnesota, New York, Texas, all put together AI task force. Here's just some more resources about people that are focused on this issue. I'm an appointee to the Illinois Supreme Court AI task force on generative AI. It's part of, Illinois is actually very innovative, I feel like, in this regard. It's part of a strategic plan that the court has had in place starting in 2021, and this was just on the agenda for 2024. What we've done is we've broken up into 3 different committees: policy, education, and customer service. So on the policy front, I'm actually on that committee, and we're trying to figure out, given the existing rules that govern the behavior of lawyers and judges in the state of Illinois, how they conduct themselves in court, how they practice law, et cetera, do we need to change those policies? Do we need to add anything? Do we need to include any comments that kind of clarify the use of AI? Do the existing rules, are they sufficient, right? There's an education committee which is focused on, to what extent are we going to require lawyers and judges in our state to get up to speed on this, about the benefits and drawbacks. And then there's a focus on customer service. How can we make the courts operate more efficiently and effectively with AI? How do we improve access to justice with AI? AI is here. Lawyers are going to use it. Judges will use it. The question is really how. Ohio is looking into AI. They have a very top-down, which is fine, approach to how Ohio state government is going to use AI and what the policies and principles are. This is their kind of AI pyramid, I guess, with an AI council at the top. You have your legal, your HR, their advisory role related to the executive leadership at various agencies in the state, and then solution development teams, right? Are they buying AI products that are being sold by Microsoft or Deloitte or other companies? Are they developing them in-house? And is all of that being done in accordance with principles that you would want it to be? The AI is fair, it's accountable, it's secure, it's transparent, it's ethical. Here's another example from Minnesota. I largely grew up there, so and I have friends that work obviously in Minnesota and are lawyers, and there the Minnesota State Bar Association had a working group on AI, and they were really focused on the implications of large language models, of which ChatGPT is one, on the unauthorized practice of law and access to justice. So in the United States and in most kind of advanced economies around the world, you can't offer legal advice unless you're a licensed attorney, right? Some people in kind of the legal tech industry think that lawyers operate as a cartel in that regard, and they're foreclosing technology solutions from kind of getting in on their game, so to speak. There's good reasons for having bright lines with respect to unauthorized practice of law, but they're also interested in access to justice. Legal services, most citizens are kind of priced out of getting legal services that they need. It can be very difficult if they don't have the funds to afford lawyers for whether it's proper planning, it's disputes, et cetera. So there's a hope that AI can help kind of bridge that gap. But really, kind of the big themes and considerations are, I think, with respect to legal practices, something like evidence. How is evidence going to be impacted by AI? This is something that came up a bunch in the task force early on when we were kind of trying to figure out, well, what is our specific charge here, right? Like we have to produce a report for the Illinois Supreme Court in the fall. And earlier on, when we were kind of trying to narrow down, we decided that something like deep fakes, which is AI-generated video or images of things that never happened, or embarrassing situations for individuals, that wasn't really going to be our focus, right? In part because people have been falsifying evidence in lawsuits since there's been lawsuits. It's just kind of part of, it's not that it happens all the time, but that sort of, what do we do about fake evidence and how do we figure it out is not a new problem, right? And in fact, the adversarial process of the legal system when you're in a dispute and in a lawsuit is kind of purpose-built to suss out that bad evidence, right? We did realize, though, in the task force that although lawyers, as part of that adversarial process, may be able to figure out when there's bad evidence introduced into a case, what if the judge is using AI in a way they're not supposed to? What sort of recourse is there? That's still an open question. How are we going to trust AI output in a world of digital slop? People are referring to kind of AI-generated content, which has been flooding the internet now for a while, as slop. And how are we going to trust what's out there? how do we establish the foundation for evidence in this world of prolific content creation? And then, do the existing rules of professional responsibility and judicial conduct cover AI already? Do we even need kind of new paradigm just because we have new technology? So something like the ABA model rules, do they factor into play here? This is from an article from Thomson Reuters, recent, I think it was last year. What does technology competence really mean? The model rules say it's an important mandate for practitioners to keep abreast of key developments in new legal technology. But what does that really mean? Is knowledge of the different types of AI technology required, right? That's actually been kind of a point of contention for us in the task force with some members who want to take a more expansive view of technology competence. As you can imagine, some of the judges in that task force have been pushing back. It's ongoing. Speaking of which, what about AI judges? People already agree to various forms of alternative dispute resolution. Would AI judges be any different? This is from an article that was on the ABA's website from October 18th last year. AI is coming for attorneys. Perhaps we should consider a more likely outcome when it may come to replace judges. Quick and dirty resolution for those who simply need to move on and move quickly. Some of the most interesting work that I did for the magistrate judge was situations where complex or sophisticated litigants would agree to have their case heard by the magistrate instead of a district court judge because it was quicker, right? And they wanted the resolution faster. This author says it's hard to imagine a professional task better suited to AI than that of the American judiciary. I think that might be overstating the case somewhat, but people think it. So lots of AI tools are out there. Many of the big service providers already have AI offerings. Here's just an example from Westlaw, CoCounsel. I have a friend who's at one of the biggest firms and in the country, and they are rolling out CoCounsel all across the law firm. And it does basically kind of the equivalent of junior lawyers, first, second, third-year lawyers. Search and review documents. It can summarize complex documents, quickly assess contract risk, like we were talking about earlier. It can draft correspondence. All of that needs to be reviewed by lawyers. And in fact, a friend who's at another big firm, he was talking about how internally they're really struggling with training of young associates because tools like this exist, and the more senior lawyers have just kind of gotten used to integrating them in their workflow. And so a lot of that training and a lot of these tasks that can be done in mere minutes with some of these tools that would have originally gone to these younger lawyers just starting out to learn as exercises is not being sent out. And so, whether or not that means there's going to be kind of a reckoning in big law moving forward in terms of training the next generation of lawyers is an open question, but it's a valid concern. So, I really think that the future practice of law is AI augmented. I think that's a good thing, but it shouldn't be at the cost of kind of the things that human beings are really good at, right? Exercising judgment, wisdom born out of experience, things that are not really easily translatable into a format that a machine can digest and kind of make that judgment call on the fly as a good judge could, a good lawyer. So there was a lot of slides, a lot of material. I'm happy to take any and all questions. This is obviously a very big subject, so it's hard to, anytime talking about this, it's hard to kind of narrow down unless it's like a super focused topic, what exactly to focus on. So curious to hear what questions you all may have. And it looks like John's walking around with a mic here.
Well, this is all totally overwhelming for me. And I assume that the purpose of your talk is not necessarily to show us what the solutions are, but show us what the problems are. But for somebody like myself who's not educated in the law, I'm very concerned about using AI, which we will all have to do if we're not doing it already and maybe even not knowing it. How do we evaluate the information that is coming back to us for our questions to determine whether it's not imaginary or whether it's real?
Yeah, well, I think the baseline kind of posture in any of this, especially with respect to evaluating information, is relying upon things that you learned about in grade school. Critical thinking, asking questions about the information, interrogating it yourself, right? But also kind of as this market matures and there's more and more product and service offerings from various companies, I do think that one way that those companies will differentiate themselves is by basically answering those questions for you without you even asking them, right? So they'll present you information, and Perplexity, which I mentioned earlier, is one where they'll tell you the sources. Hey, this is where we found it. You can go check it yourself, right? So I do think that is one way that companies will try and position to provide that comfort that you're kind of looking for.
I'm a lawyer, and I've been in practice in Cleveland for 60-some years. In a large firm, many of my partners are involved principally in business matters. And your question about whether the decisions they make or the questions they deal with are better dealt with AI is a good question. However, my field is trust in the states. I also work closely with domestic relations lawyers. In both fields, 3/4 of our time is spent with people, and most of those people recognize that the choices that they have really depend on each other, and what they really want is someone to be sympathetic and helpful. And I can't see how AI can contribute to that really very much at all. Would you like to comment on that?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think that one of the most valuable things that lawyers offer is that kind of counselor role, right? So that people can feel like they're seen, they're heard. Like you said, as you put it, there's a sympathetic ear to their issue or something that they're planning out, especially when it's something that's overwhelming, right? I don't know how AI is going to replace that anytime soon. I mean, face-to-face conversations are paramount. One of the things I've always done is I like organizing events. I've done it over the years, and some of my best clients are people that I've just met at events in a kind of casual setting, because it's just much easier to establish that connection. And as long as AI continues to be, our main interface is through a keyboard with it, it won't be able to mimic that. Now, of course, when you start combining it with robotics and video and everything else, then it gets a little dicier. But even there, I still don't see how you'll be able to, these systems will be able to replicate that.
Thank you for your presentation. And the one this morning too. This may not be in your area of expertise, but all this AI and the cryptocurrency and all that takes massive amounts of electricity to run. It's databases, all that. How are local utilities going to be able to keep up as, you're saying it's moving ahead. It's moving ahead faster than we can build power plants or produce electric. Have you got a comment on that?
Yeah, it's a very serious public policy concern. And I've done a lot of policy work over the last 2 years in the state of Illinois. And in fact, we had a bill that was introduced specifically targeting kind of cryptocurrency mining companies. And the sentiment was, hey, this is pollution of a kind, right? All this energy is being devoted to this, exercise of questionable societal value. It has been interesting to kind of observe the policy posture to kind of the cryptocurrency industry versus the usage of energy by AI companies. I think that reckoning is coming because the way that these models kind of innovate is devouring more energy and more computational power and everything else. And I don't know what the answer is where you kind of have that happy balance, right, between the just general needs of society for energy and these new technologies, which are extremely energy intensive. I don't know. Perhaps we need a refocus on nuclear energy in this country. I don't. It's not something I've investigated deeply, but it's a real problem.
Thank you again for shedding light on all this. Can you teach AI ethics or ethical behavior? So if the case of the legal briefs, and can you recognize that those aren't true cases and then say this is not, we can't put that in there itself? Is there a way to teach it to do that? And if so, could that help?
Teach the AI system to do that?
Yeah, to be able to recognize, I can't put this into that legal brief because this case doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Is it able to know that? Because it's taking information from all over the world, so I think the capacity is amazing and the speed is just incredible. But can it say, there's certain things I can't put in there, like cases that don't exist. Can you teach it to be ethical? I guess.
Yeah, I think that there are likely technical solutions to that problem. But I do think that your question gets to a much deeper question related to kind of theory of mind and what intelligence actually is, right? These systems are not, they aren't like us. I don't know how else to say it, right? They don't have the same kind of self-referential internal experience. They don't know how to forget information usually. These are, by the way, you've identified kind of like the frontier of areas of research with respect to trying making these systems more useful, right? I think that the state of the market right now is such that, OpenAI put out ChatGPT in November of 2022, and that kind of captured the imagination of the broader public in a way that hadn't existed previously. And everything since then and up to that point was just, can we do it, right? And so these questions of kind of like, how do we, cut down on edge cases and things that are, and mistakes, how do we correct that sort of error correcting and everything else, haven't really been leading the way. They haven't been carrying the torch of development. And I think as, these AI systems kind of, interact with the real world and like real business and real disputes and everything else, these companies are already receiving feedback saying, hey, it can't, this is actually not useful in this regard because it makes these mistakes, right? Yeah, so I don't think it's a intractable problem. I think that there's probably a solution going forward. It just, the incentives have not really been aligned for that to be the focus just yet.
Also a lawyer, but an environmental lawyer. And it strikes me that the real problem is that we use specialized databases all the time. You know, even in the 70s, there was a specialized database, two different important specialized databases, totally related only to environmental law cases. And that was where you looked to find authorities and what the most recent decision was. So the real question is that you need to teach the system to basically, you can't, until you can rely on the system the same way you rely when you yourself do a data search and you go, okay, that doesn't really say that at all, and oh, this is good. Until it can do that, it's really not, it's not doing anything that the existing databases aren't doing for you by you writing a search. I mean, I don't understand how anybody thinks you can automate a law office with it. You can automate a law office with a lot of things in terms of you create a form, you decide what that form is appropriate for, what things you're going to plug in and out. But that's not AI. That's you using a data system.
Yeah, and I think part of the issue there that you didn't say, but is you know, kind of a question of knowledge democratization, right? A lot of this information, a lot of the way that these judgment calls are made is siloed, whether it's, you know, in you as an individual or the firm that you're at or a firm itself, you know, they have their own way of doing things, and it's not widely known, right? So, you know, a lot of these systems are built, they're trained on the internet and publicly available data sets. You know, perhaps they're trained on data sets that maybe they shouldn't have trained on, you know, which is the subject of a lot of the lawsuits here. But you don't have, you know, the law is not really open source. It kind of, I feel like it should be, but that's just not the reality, right? And so, you know, I think that we're a long way away from AI lawyers for a lot of these kind of structural reasons, right? They can't be trained the same way that an attorney can, in part because the information they need to get trained that way is siloed and it's behind, you know, whether it's behind paywalls or it's just, you know, there's human barriers or whatever. And I don't know how that changes, right? You know, I have a mentor who, you know, anytime there's these kind of like efficiency tools, and this was years ago, he was like, you know, why would a firm want to use this? You know, because all of a sudden I'm going to be way more efficient and not be able to bill as much. Like, you know, there's certain structural incentive problems in the practice of law that, you know, in part, right or wrong, or whether it's a big deal or not, these AI systems can't be as good as they possibly could be because of that. I don't know if that answers your question or kind of. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that that's where it could get really beneficial. I think one way, you know, kind of somebody, you know, perhaps one potential solution are local private large language models, right? That the information is not leaving the, you know, the walls of my laptop here. It's at my firm, okay? I train it myself. It's not going out into the internet, and it acts as an augmented assistant, right, to the workflow that I'm already engaging in. I think that that could be really beneficial. The question, of course, is like, how can one of these AI companies make money off of offering that, right? You know, Westlaw, Thompson, and Lexis, you know, they all have their offerings, and they think that there's a way that they're going to be able to make money on it, but it remains to be seen.
There are certain hazards with computers and the law. If you'll permit a story, it's not long. Like 30 or 40 years ago, when we first had what we call automated legal research, that is to say, when cases were fed into the data system and you could do actual word search. I recall being in a room with a number of trusted state lawyers and Jim Preston from Squire Sanders in Cleveland, who was the inventor of that system, was showing it to us. And we put in a question about wills, that's my field. He finally had to shut the damn thing off. He was getting thousands, if not millions, of references. He said, well, the problem is that you can't do that. Every word, every case, somewhere in the case, the word will is there. The system that it will not. Now we know what you have to do is you have to enter the words associated with it. But there's some choices there. And the automated system can't make those choices. You have to make them. And you know that some of your choices will be good and some won't. I think my point is that these systems are wonderful aid, but you've got to exercise some judgment in using the information that you get from them.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that, one way that, perhaps these systems will never evolve to a point where they can kind of match human creativity, whether or not it's, coming up with creative legal theories or, oh, well, it turns out, that this particular client problem is actually a lot like this other client problem in an unrelated field that, the machine is not going to think, oh, you're dealing with a will, and now I'm going to go look at, I don't know, some sort of business partnership issue, but you may make that connection, right? And I don't know how you program that, I guess, intuition into it, right? I don't know that intuition is something that can be, or creativity, those are concepts that we're all kind of born with. I don't know how you systematize that and try and put it into, one of these systems.
Thank you very much, Nelson, for both these sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.